No one knows if you'll ever need a shelter. But in this atomic age, it's wise to be prepared. The best advice your government can give you is alert today, alive tomorrow.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
This program has been produced from photographic material made available to us by the THG branch of the Knights Templar, the oldest order of chivalry. We are grateful to the order for trusting us with some of the most closely guarded secrets of all time. Millions of people have seen unidentified flying objects, UFOs or flying saucers. Many of these strange objects have been seen to be operated by human-like creatures. It is far too frightening for most of us to consider what these objects may be, where they come from, and who's sending them. But in this program we will examine the evidence in the form of photos, diagrams and plans which link the enormous number of sightings during and after World War II with research, construction and test flight of a great number of electromagnetically driven craft. Some of these graphics are artists' impressions, but nearly all of what follows has been given to us as genuine material, which has been successfully kept secret for half a century. These photographs were taken by an eyewitness who describes a saucer-shaped craft flying a little faster than a jet airplane, flying very low, emitting a faint singing noise. These photos were taken as it flew above him. The sighting was in Germany.
Just in time I take photos as it flies above me. It has 3 round technical devices underneath, and in the middle a deep blue point with the white emblem of the German Nazi Party. The UFO is quite large. It is light blue in color, and it frightens me. It looks very strange, and it flies very quietly away from me. Behind the wall, another UFO is parked in the dark, but I can see all the different parts quite clearly. Again, there are 3 technical devices underneath, and there are also some sort of wheels which were put underneath to make it movable. It looks like a big axle with big wheels. A truck is there, and a crane in the background. There are only 2 people visible, one underneath the spaceship and the other one on the roof, where there is a small cockpit. Everything is very quiet. There's a cross painted on the spaceship that looks similar to the German Nazi flag. There are no glass windows visible, but there are two round openings with something above them. Underneath the UFO there are strange-looking plates which look like rotors of a turbine engine, but they are probably something different. There are protruding parts underneath that look like guns. They could not possibly be antennas because they are too thick. The ship has a diameter of 18 to 20 meters. It looks really dangerous. Next to the truck there's another car parked. It's a VW. Everyone laughed when I told them the story of what I saw. They say I was drunk. I might have been drunk too much beer, but I'm convinced I saw a UFO.
In the week following this UFO report, there were other reports also from Bavaria. For example, a petrol Bowser attendant who said he'd seen a UFO, but people accused him of being drunk and made fun of him. So to avoid further ridicule, he said he was just making a joke. UFO reports are difficult to believe. It's up to each person to form their own opinion and to consider the implications for themselves. On the 14th of December 1944, the New York Times published the first of the UFO news stories. Floating mystery ball is new Nazi air weapon. It was disclosed on December the 13th by the Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force that a new German weapon made its appearance on the Western Air Front. American airmen report that they are encountering silver-coloured spheres in the air above German territory. The spheres are being encountered singly and in clusters. Sometimes they are semi-translucent. This report is suggestive of electromagnetically driven craft. These objects frequently appeared where German troops were concentrated in Northern Europe. Many ghost rockets were sighted, especially in Scandinavia and Norway. On the screen now is a drawing from the SS files dated 7th of November 1943. The existence of UFOs, which almost all serious researchers now regard as a fact, give us a clue about a whole new technology. The enormous sparks we call lightning give us a glimpse at the immense energy freely available to power these machines. The life energy inside every human being is another aspect of this same magical power. These things are spoken of in the German Tuller Society and through one of its members in the SS. These concepts were quite different to those of the German military at the time. This was the beginnings of the first so-called Green Party, and perhaps ironically a search for a new harmony between man and nature. In the German Tuller Society, the secret sign was the Black Sun. This same sign was evident in ancient Babylon and to the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians. In these ancient times, the sign of the Black Sun was symbolized by a cross. The cross recurs throughout history as a symbol of power. This symbol can be seen in the swastika of the Third Reich. The cross is seen on this Messerschmitt. The Knight's Cross is a variation of this symbol, which is thousands of years old. We do not know where the Germans of the Third Reich got their ideas. This drawing of ancient Babylon displays the concept of an invincible power from the heavens. Victor Schauberger was one of the leading scientists in a very intense push for a new and clean energy. Simplified, it could be called implosion instead of explosion. There was a group within the Third Reich who were searching for constructive solutions, not destructive ones. In these diagrams you can see a new type of vehicle was being planned. The normal combustion engines using fossil fuels in our cars are dependent on the explosion principle and hence tend to be destructive to the environment. Victor Schauberger's experimental vehicles were based on esoteric principles and focused his research on electrogravitation. In other words, regarding gravity as an electrical force which can be utilized for propulsion. The U-13 Department of the SS concentrated their efforts on this technique. This was the means by which the Haunebu flying saucer was powered. Here you can see the construction plans of the Haunebu 2. The computer graphic enhancement shows something of the look of these Haunebu flying saucers. The engine is very likely to have been designed by Captain Hans Kohler and built by the German AEG company in 1944. The engine being called the Kohler converter. This engine was designed so that it needed a relatively small amount of energy to activate it. This energy coming from an accumulator or battery. After a short time, the Kohler converter built up sufficient energy transformed from the gravitational field of the Earth. This is a diagram of the Kohler converter. And this is a photograph of the actual converter, operating on a principle of genius simplicity. This is a preliminary sketch of the Haunebu 2. The cockpit here is outlined in red. With a circular driving unit beneath, outlined in purple. With adjacent space for people or soldiers. This machine was built somewhat like a modern ship, designed to be self-sufficient for long periods of time, with sleeping space and working area. Looking a bit like the brim of a hat, the saucer part of this machine is the means by which it is steered. This being achieved by emitting an electrically generated force in the chosen direction. There were a number of other spherical and saucer-shaped prototypes also built at this time, but using conventional rocket power. Under the code V7, a number of military prototypes were developed. These were concurrent with the V1 and V2 rocket developments. The Schreiber-Habimol flying machine was a jet-propelled vertical takeoff and landing craft developed in 1942. The first three prototypes were badly damaged when tested, and the project was abandoned. Dr. Richard Meaty, in cooperation with the Italian researcher Dr. Giuseppe Belluzza, also worked on a flying machine which was round in shape and developed a new V7 prototype. Here are two photographs of the V7, Hitler's new wonder weapon. On the 7th of April 1944, Meaty showed construction plans to Hitler and demonstrated the vehicle in flight. In this photograph, Hitler is standing next to a model of the new prototype. This V7 saucer was built with 12 BMW engines of the type 028. The V7 rose to 20,000 metres on the first test and 24,000 metres on the second test. Helium was the fuel used in this machine. Here is a plan of the V7. After this, a new smaller type called Vril was developed. Here you can see a sketch of the Vril. And here's a photograph of the test flight. Work on these unconventional flying machines was a race with time, since conventional rockets were also being developed, and it was a matter of competing for resources, materials and manpower to build them. These are some of the rockets being developed at this time. Every nation involved in the Second World War were developing new weapons. But the real wonder weapons were not associated with fire and noise, but were being developed and propelled quietly and secretly. An intermediate step was Project Fireball. The Allied forces called them Foo Fighters. The fireballs were developed in Vienna Neustadt, a small town near Vienna, under the technical group of the SS. Here is a photograph of the fireballs in flight. These were radio controlled with no people on board. They were also called flying turtles, and due to certain new fuel combinations, they emitted a strong light. Developed to disrupt the ignition systems of enemy aircraft. This fits in with numerous reports of power failures associated with UFO sightings, including the New York blackout of the 60s. Next we have a drawing indicating the relationship between the Earth's magnetic force, seen here with the North and South Pole, and the electromagnetic field around the flying saucer. This is a list of 261 flying saucers, including 3 Honeyboo models and 84 Vrils. These were built towards the end of World War II. As well as this, there was some Meterphile 7. The Honeyboo had a diameter of 25 meters. The development and construction of these flying machines created the most top-secret documents and the most top-secret projects of the Second World War. The engine of the Hanebü was the Kohler Tachionata electrogravitation motor in combination with a Fundegraf belt generator. Most of the photographs are of the Hanebü 2. Here we see the rooms inside the Hanebü. From these drawings we can imagine what it would have looked like inside a German flying saucer. The red markers here are indicating guns on this saucer. These are photographs of a Hanebü 2, probably taken during a test flight. We can see a gun on the bottom of this Hanebü, and what may be a symbol of the Third Reich. What a terrifying impact this must have made on people seeing the craft at a low altitude. This is a tank gun on the bottom of a Hanebü. Here again are construction plans from the Hanebü series, indicating that this mystery was once a reality. This gives weight to the suggestion that international oil companies, who control the majority of world commerce, may have something to gain by the continuing suppression of the technology which keeps these massive machines silently in the air. One explanation for the emission of light commonly associated with the night sightings of UFOs is that one method of propulsion is an intense cathode ray emission, creating a vacuum into which the craft moves. This form of propulsion is compatible with the misty impressions of this photograph. The gun is clearly visible under this craft. These photographs show the Hanebü 2 experimental craft fitted underneath with tank guns developed for the Sherman Panzer or Panther tanks. Although originally these craft were designed to carry electronic guns, they were later fitted with 7.5cm tank cannons. The weight of the cannon would not have been a problem on the Hanebü craft, which weighed almost 100 tons anyway, because the tachyon electrogravitation engine generated its own gravitational field. Plans have been discovered for much larger craft. This Hanebü 4 had several guns. There is also evidence of small, highly manoeuvrable craft. There were 17 vril of 11.5 metres with a speed of 2,900 kilometres per hour. with remote control gun. On this Vril 9 plan we can see the cockpit of this one-man craft. These are low-altitude test flight photos. On this enlargement we can see the pilot in the cockpit. UFO information is also available from the Huygens Society. Next, our translator comments on some newspaper clippings.
Here's an interesting press release. The first UFO flies in Prague. Flying saucers invented in Germany. Reconstructed flying saucers. The questions if planet Earth is under the control of the UFOs is an interesting one. Is there a danger from an invasion from space? Above the river Elbe there was seen a mysterious flying saucer. There was a hunt for UFOs in Canada too. The American President Jimmy Carter has seen a UFO too. All over the world there has been sightings of UFOs and mysterious flying objects. Mysterious UFO turns alarm at the NATO. Secret UFOs above Hessen. The interest of UFOs is Soviets' aim too. Edwin Aldrin, the second man on the moon, saw 7 UFOs and he was not allowed to talk about it. UFOs at night above Hamburg. 2 policemen saw it too. 100 Germans saw a blue UFO. The watch stopped. UFO above Soviet Union. Nuremberg. Pilot hunts UFO. US secret documents prove UFOs caused atom weapons to be useless. Space pieces, a newspaper headline. The mystery of UFOs are solved. UFOs do not come from outer space, but are Nazis who want to create a new Reich. Governments of the world are informed but afraid. If there is a serious economic crisis, they are afraid the Nazis will come with their flying saucers.
It is not only flying saucers that have been seen, but also flying cigars. Huge spaceships shaped like a cigar. These could be the motherships. The idea of a mothership was developed in Germany in 1944, or possibly earlier. This project was called Andromeda. They were 100 9 meters long, powered by 4 Tula engines. They were designed to carry 1 Hanibu and a few vril. This is an example of a construction plan, very rarely seen. This photograph of the mothership with UFOs emerging is from George Adamski. George Adamski also saw a Hanibu-type spacecraft. He claimed they came from Venus. For comparison, here is a computer-generated replica of the Hanibu 2. This is a CIA paper from 1952 requiring all UFOs to be reported to the military. The CIA recommend to security advisors what information may go to the press in order to avoid panic. Almost all photographs from then on have been censored. About that time, a movie called Earth vs. Flying Saucers was released, but very soon disappeared. This had extraordinary special effects and has only recently turned up in local video stores. This German news clip is a report that an American farmer who witnessed the landing of a flying saucer claimed that the occupants spoke German. The farmer was arrested. The strange markings on this spacecraft show drawings similar to the swastika. Adamski had a friend who also saw flying saucers landing. He was a relative of Winston Churchill. His name was Desmond Leslie. Adamski and Leslie were not arrested. From then on, saucers looking like a Hanibu 2 were thought to come from Venus. The origin of the many types of UFOs seen in almost every country on the planet remains a question. It is interesting to note the very great interest shown by the German military before and during the war in the Antarctic continent at the South Pole. In 1938, as Germany was strongly preparing for war, Captain Richter led an Antarctic expedition. He was sent there by Hermann Goering. This top-secret expedition was directed to ice-free parts of the Antarctic. The German part of Antarctica was called Neuschwabenland. These positions are where German flags were erected. This is a document of gratitude signed by Hermann Goering. At the height of the Second World War, Admiral Dönitz, the submarine warfare expert, made a very secret mission to move the so-called Last Battalion. This is a list of nearly 100 U-boats which remain unaccounted for. From the serial numbers in the left-hand column we can see that this is not a random list but a complete series of U-boats which have disappeared. There is evidence of a number of secret bases in the Antarctic. This is a statue of Marduk, more of him later. Admiral Karl Dönitz and a president of the Third Reich signed the surrender documents which ended World War II in May 1945. But they never surrendered the Third Reich itself. So officially Germany never surrendered. And this raises the possibility that there may still be German forces in the Antarctic. At the beginning of the war in 1939, Hitler said that if Germany was overrun, the fight would continue from outside. Perhaps we need not place any special significance to this remark. During 1952 in Washington there was panic. You can see from these photographs of a radar screen UFOs flying in formation. They went straight over the White House. A number of radar surveillance centres had the same alarming images on their screens. This was July 1952. Some years prior to that, in 1946 and 1947, Admiral Byrd undertook a US Navy invasion of Antarctica disguised as a scientific expedition. It had the code name High Jump. After preparations in the previous year, Operation High Jump started on the 30th of February 1947. And yet on the 4th of March, after the disappearance of several aircraft, the expedition was cancelled. Although the details have never been published, Admiral Byrd said that objects were able to fly from one pole to the other, and it was necessary to defend ourselves against flying machines from the Antarctic. This is a sketch from the German magazine Spiegel indicating the flying patterns of UFOs. A New Zealand airline pilot, Bruce Cathy, observed similar patterns over New Zealand. In 1958, the Americans sent a major expedition to the Antarctic, during which on the 27th of August, the 30th of August and the 9th of September, there is evidence that nuclear missiles were fired at Neuswardenland, the German territory. This could be linked to the holes in the ozone layer in the Antarctic today. Parts of a report of a kamikaze operation being a joint German-Japanese expedition in the Hanibu 3 to the planet Mars. A Hanibu 3 with a diameter of 71 metres is claimed to have enough power to travel the 75 million kilometres the distance from Earth to Mars. There is a 1945 report that the SS Department D4 decided to make this journey. This would have been a one-way trip, unless they received help along the way or at the other end of the journey. In this latter part of the war, the level of desperation was sufficient to try anything that could change the fate of Germany. The Hanibu 3 was supposed to reach Mars in 8.5 months, in January 1946. The Hanibu 3 was the only craft which had the speed to reach Mars, and yet if it did arrive, there's no evidence of a friendly welcome. These photographs of the surface of Mars show the bleak landscape that would have greeted these space travellers. Many researchers, seeing this huge carved face on Mars, wonder if it might have been carved long ago as a deliberately grim reminder left by a civilization destroying itself with war and greed, or nuclear holocaust, perhaps millions of years ago. There was an old Egyptian legend of the god Marduk being sad about his home country, Mars. There are photographs of pyramids on Mars and of a ruined city the size of Los Angeles, complete with an underground grid system still emitting infrared or heat radiation. We can only speculate on these things, but it is remarkable that with satellites able to read a newspaper on Earth from various vantage points orbiting around the planet, and with almost every astronaut coming back with stories of seeing flying saucers in space or being greeted by 100 spacecraft on what is supposed to be the first landing on Moon, that no believable explanation has been offered regarding the vast number of sightings by people of all ages and professions. For 1 million in the USA alone, where military personnel are trained to debunk sightings, and NASA curiously publishes photographs showing UFOs, such as this one. Whilst it makes little sense for armament manufacturers to create hundreds of thousands of nuclear bombs, enough to extinguish all life on this planet many, many times, there is likely to be more to this puzzle. And it may be one of the many vitally important realities which are kept secret by the powerful few. These are official NASA photographs. Exactly what is pictured remains uncertain. It is, however, worth mentioning a report in the highly regarded Australian magazine Nexus that a Russian spacecraft photographing Mars ceased transmission in the presence of a huge UFO. Perhaps the Americans and Russians are preparing their Star Wars capabilities for an invader from another planet. Or perhaps we are being used as a manufacturing base for deadly toys to be delivered to some distant intergalactic war game. Every ancient civilization has stories of space travellers in fiery chariots from the sky. These pictures show the legend of Marduk. Legends of Marduk and other space gods from the past usually include predictions that they will return. We are still left to guess whether the UFOs seen so often are evidence of visitors from outer space or examples of advanced anti-gravity craft made secretly on Earth in great numbers. Whatever the truth of these things is, it may be time to find a new system of planetary management where love is the currency and money and time are only rated brief mentions in history books.
The United States Strategic Defense Initiative is capitalizing on many forms of directed energy. Although most of SDI must be carried out in secrecy, recently released footage is giving us a closer look at these Star Wars projects. In the Delta 181 experiment, payloads of sensors and other test objects are sent aloft, taking position in the Earth's orbit. Delta 181, with a payload of 14 sensors, helped characterize surface test missiles against a variety of space and Earth backgrounds. These ultra-sensitive devices are able to detect differences in groups of in-mission enemy ordnance. Lighter objects are identified as decoys by slight differences in motion. Reporting back to central supercomputers, the data enables the system to act on real warheads and ignore the decoys. Delta 183, the next experiment in the Delta Star series, continues this line of research with a projected 9-month orbital life. After taking position, Delta Star, with an even higher order of sensors, begins collecting data which will characterize the plumes of several sounding test rockets launched at intervals. Studies in kinetic and directed energy have broadened the range of knowledge and generated quantum leaps in advanced military technology. By combining laboratory development and large integrated ground and space experiments, numerous SDI interceptor advances have been made in relatively little time.
Plus 176. Plus 180. Looks like it's spinning and pointing across the field.
In the Bear experiment, neutron particle beam tests exploit the capability of a stream of atomic particles to penetrate deep into targets. During a short space flight, the vehicle carrying the beam accelerator rotates in position while the neutral particle beam is propagated. In this first ever firing of a neutral particle beam in space, no targets were used. Rather, the behavior of the beam during firing was studied to determine the effects of space and lack of an atmosphere. This rotation of the entire satellite fixes aim on the target. Unlike the laser beam, which cuts through its targets, the neutral particle beam penetrates deep inside of ICBMs and other hostile intruders, destroying or disrupting their workings from within.
10, 9, 8, 7.
The hover test experiment showed that it is feasible for vector thrusters to fire for microseconds to keep an interceptor on target. This technology was first achieved on the ground at Edwards Air Force Base. Hover tests at Edwards involved this 21-second flight of an SDI projectile facsimile in a laboratory. The deployment concept for strategic defense would send a number of orbiting interceptors on missions of non-nuclear destruction. Attacking missiles are killed in early phases of flight by the kinetic force of impact at extremely high speed. Ground-based operation of defenses deep inside the atmosphere is being developed by projects such as the Army's Flexible, Lightweight, Agile Guided Experiment, or FLAG. It's a concept of using advanced technology to hit a bullet with a bullet. A U.S. Army Lance missile is fired toward the test area from about 32 miles away. 100 seconds after this target is launched, they raise the 12-foot-long flag in hot pursuit. The improved millimeter wave built-in radar locks onto the Lance. Flag's onboard computer then chooses from 216 rocket motors about the size of shotgun shells, firing the motors appropriate to moving the flag vehicle on the correct course at the corresponding command.
As early as 1984, SDI performed a successful mid-course intercept, hitting a bullet with a bullet. In 1985, SDI demonstrated that a laser could destroy a ballistic missile booster case. In 1986, as part of the Delta series, Delta 180 intercepted a thrusting target in space. As amazing as these feats were, in many ways, those were easy tasks. The real challenge is creating a system, not just a single technology. A system that cannot be overwhelmed or defensed with a single trigger. As with any research program, many ideas were explored in the early days. One possible solution would be the use of nuclear warheads, which, like horseshoes and hand grenades, only had to come close. There was the idea of huge lasers planted in space that could hit boosters, buses, and warheads with the speed of light. Both ideas have fallen out of favor. Nuclear warheads might create more problems than they would solve by generating an environment so alive with infrared and other energies and frequencies that nothing could be seen by SDI sensors and seekers. As for space-based lasers, in order to get the power needed for lethality, a space-based laser would have to be so big that the cost of boosting it into space in quantity would be prohibitive. Plus, having only a few such stations would make them vulnerable to enemy attack. So over time, SDI has become more streamlined and elegant. The need to acquire, track, and point at incoming missiles in all their stages, all their phenomenology, and against the background of space, the sun, the Earth, and the Van Allen radiation belt, has remained unchanged from the beginning. So has the need for massive, radiation-hardened, nuclear-hardened, jam-proof computers and communication. Phase 1, however, has come to focus on boost and post-boost, as well as mid-course defense. In both cases, we are looking at KEWs, or kinetic energy weapons. The KKVs, or kinetic kill vehicles, carry no explosive warheads of any kind. More on that later. Phase 2 focuses more on the mid-course and terminal threat through the use of DEWs, or directed energy weapons. These are speed-of-light weapons involving such technologies as neutral particle beams, free electron lasers, and chemical lasers. When you think of SDI, the first thing that comes to mind is impacting enemy missiles and warheads in space with bombs or laser beams. The biggest challenge to SDI may not be hitting a target. It's finding it and tracking it. ATP-FC is acquire, track, and point. That information is then converted to FC, or fire control. The first line of information comes from BSTS, Boost Surveillance and Tracking System. BSTS is a series of satellites looking down at the Earth. They are in geostable orbit, remaining over a single Earth point, 22,300 miles in space. A boosting rocket creates a large, white-hot plume that is relatively easy to spot and track. The tricky part comes in the handoff from the plume to the hard body of the missile itself. The tracking is of the plume, not the missile, so any kinetic or directed energy weapon must be targeted at the booster body, not the plume. A direct hit on the plume is worthless. As an ICBM sheds its boosters and becomes a bus, it loses most of its plume, but is still hot and still carries all of its warheads. Once out of post-boost, SSTS, or Space-Based Surveillance and Tracking, coupled with ground-based radar, take over and track right through the terminal attack phase. To accomplish simply acquiring and tracking an ICBM with multiple warhead missiles demands 4 major components. First, you have to pick out all the missiles from all the space and Earth backgrounds of visible wavelength and infrared wavelength. Second, you have to distinguish the missiles, and especially the mid-course warheads, from decoys and the over 5,000 satellites and other pieces of space junk floating around up there. Third, you need a computer system that is as fast as a supercomputer, hardened against radiation and electromagnetic bursts, and small enough to be boosted, powered, and cooled in space. And finally, you need a communication system that is jam-proof and secure, or the whole program will fail. One of the toughest target acquisition jobs is finding an object against the background of the Van Allen radiation belt, or the Aurora Borealis over the North Pole. If SDI could not find a target there, you can bet that's where all the attacking missiles would come from. As early as 1986, the Earth Limb program was measuring all the phenomenology of the Earth background, including the aurora. SDI has since proven it can find the target even there. The 9-month Delta Star flight conducted well over 100 operations measuring and mapping Earth and space backgrounds to be embedded in SDI sensor memory banks. It also collected the effects of various chemicals released in space as possible countermeasures. The Queen's Match flight of 1988 collected infrared data on foreign targets as SDI continued to build its database. In 1989, the Janus experiment used high-resolution infrared imagery to collect and catalog the signatures of post-boost vehicles so future SDI sensors could compare what they are observing to a database of known phenomenology and recognize what they are looking at. Distinguishing decoys can be tough, but not impossible. The first step is to discover the different signatures of warheads and decoys. The Delta 180 series has been collecting information and helping build a database of vehicle and decoy signatures. Another way to distinguish warheads from decoys is interactively. SDI is testing methods of hitting both decoys and warheads with broad-beamed, low-power lasers. The heavier, dense warheads will absorb the laser energy and become warm or marked, while the laser energy will pass right through or destroy the decoy. Weapons guidance systems and seekers can then go only to the warmer, marked targets. SDI computing capability has grown and shrunk at the same time. SDI needs supercomputer-style capacity in space, but can't spare the room, weight, or power. While space-based computers don't need the memory, they do need the speed. Comparing a BP flight computer with a Cray-1, we see the BP has 1/3 the MIPS, or millions of instructions per second speed, but it weighs 3 pounds compared to 10,000 and uses only 28 watts of power compared to 100,000 watts for the Cray-1. SDI is working on diamond-based computer chips compared to the current silicon-based chips. Diamond chips can take operating temperatures of 500 degrees Celsius compared to 100 degrees Celsius failure temperatures for silicon chips. This means that future SDI computers can be totally solid. No need for space to cool chips. Even at the speed of light, less distance to travel means faster processing. Space-to-space communications will probably be at 60 gigahertz. This ultra-high frequency has two major advantages. It is out of the range of nuclear effects, which are frequency-dependent. 60 gigahertz is also less susceptible to Earth-based jamming. The 60 gigahertz signal, and therefore any jamming signal, is absorbed by the oxygen absorption line in the Earth's atmosphere. It would never reach space, but would be absorbed. This space-to-space communication also points to another critical feature of SDI, independent operation of weapon systems. If one part of the entire SDI system fails or is destroyed, the others must proceed as instructed by themselves. Phase 1 weapons are all kinetic kill vehicles. The two systems are brilliant pebbles and ground-based interceptors. GBI focuses on mid-course or exo-atmospheric RVs and will be fired from CONUS bases. In 1987, the FLAGI, or Flexible Lightweight Agile Guided Experiment, successfully intercepted a theater-type missile re-entry vehicle using a radar-guided interceptor. Between the 1984 hitting a bullet with a non-nuclear bullet test and the 1987 FLAGI test, the problem became less hitting and destroying the target than finding and seeking the target. ERIS, or Exo-Atmospheric Re-Entry Vehicle Interceptor Subsystem, will test all the issues created by a mid-course intercept, including optical seeker, divert, and axial propulsion, all under stressing conditions. One of the keys is to eliminate the effects of GBI's thrusting environment as it streaks up through the atmosphere seeking its mid-course target. While other sensors in SSTS and GBR, or ground-based radar, may locate the target, onboard sensors must function in order to allow any GBI to seek and destroy its target. This is done primarily with infrared seekers. Initial validation tests will be conducted using a standard Minuteman I ICBM with a KKV mounted as the payload. In its operational phase, the GBI will be smaller than the second stage of a Minuteman. The ERIS kinetic kill vehicle carries all its own systems, including avionics, divert propulsion, infrared seeker, and kill enhancement device to improve lethality. The first full ERIS test flights are scheduled for 1991. The heart of SDI Phase 1 will undoubtedly be brilliant pebbles. It is smaller and smarter, hence the move from smart rocks to brilliant pebbles. As a kinetic kill vehicle, BP carries no warheads. Its mission is to find and destroy boost and post-boost enemy vehicles simply by running into them, like throwing a rock at a bottle. At the incredible closing speeds of a BP vehicle and a boosting rocket, over 14,000 kilometers per second, the two simply liquefy and literally pass through each other. Since the time window to acquire and track a boost or post-boost vehicle is so short, any first-layer system must be space-based. There isn't time to get it into position. It must always be there. Red team, blue team countermeasure analysis has shown the singlet system to be the most effective. While packing up to 12 brilliant pebbles on one station would be more efficient, it becomes a meaningful target to an enemy in much the same way a post-boost bus is. When the system is deployed, brilliant pebbles will consist of 4,067 individual weapons poised in space, ready to strike. The cost of destroying a singlet system approaches the cost of a nuclear attack by an enemy. It's just not feasible. Once the attack command is issued, Brilliant Pebbles is self-contained and independent. Each pebble carries a life jacket to protect its computers and components from radiation, and the whole unit from space dust and debris. The jacket also contains the solar array to power the weapon while it sits quietly in space, waiting to strike. Since a geostable orbit would put the pebble too far away to get to its target in time, each pebble has a star tracking system which monitors its location at all times. Its own tracking and communication systems allow BP to find and attack its boosting and post-boost target independently and ensure that each pebble attacks a different target with no further information from C-cubed once the release command is issued.
Cameras rolling.
One of the most significant SDI tests to date was the full duration flight test of a space-based interceptor soon to become Brilliant Pebbles. This hover test brought together all the elements of acquisition, tracking, control, and independent operation. This vehicle is tracking a heat source similar to a boosting rocket on the other side of the wall. It is operating totally on its own. One of the most exciting moments is when the system handed off the plume to the missile hard body for final lethal intercept. While it must remain in space indefinitely, the active life of a Brilliant Pebble is under 30 seconds. At the end of 1990, another hover test was successfully conducted. Here, the vehicle, with all its controls and lethality, is tiny compared to the first test vehicle. This miniaturization reduces the cost of boosting into space and makes a Brilliant Pebble truly a pebble and much more difficult to find. SDI Phase 2 consists of programs and systems with longer lead times and more technology challenges. They are designed to provide layers to SDI. A layered, multifaceted series of defense systems is the heart of an SDI strategy. Knocking out or countermeasuring any one system does not render SDI ineffective. There are 2 kinetic weapons and 3 speed-of-light weapon systems. Head-eye, hypervelocity gun, neutral particle beam, space-based laser, and ground-based laser. Head-eye, or high endo-atmospheric defense interceptor, is similar to Phase 1 GBI. Only Head-eye strikes RVs in terminal phase, just after any remaining decoys are stripped away by the atmosphere. In an ideal situation, Head-eye would not be needed because all warheads would have been destroyed in boost or mid-course. The hypervelocity gun, or HVG, is in some ways the simplest weapon. A very, very high-speed projectile fired from space or ground through electromagnetic acceleration. Neutral particle beams have been propagated on Earth for some time. They are immensely powerful, but the real question is, how will they behave in the vacuum of space? And can the accelerators and power systems be made small enough to be put into space? Laser weapons are both ground and space-based. Right now, the space-based laser may be the most effective in the interactive discrimination of targets from decoys. They would be chemical lasers. Ground-based lasers can get all the power they need. There are no real size limitations. The challenge is to get the beam into space through the atmosphere and direct it to a target. The first Head-eye flight test was conducted January 26, 1990. It lasted only 7 seconds, but it proved a lot. At the very high speeds achieved by Head-eye, at least 7,800 feet per second, both the bow wave and heat at the nose tip of the vehicle can make the seeker sensors unreliable. A cryogenic cooler is sprayed over the LWIR window. This instantly reduces the temperature to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. While all the attention in SDI is focused on the weapons and kills themselves, without something as seemingly mundane as cooling a seeker window for just a few seconds, there could be no intercept, no high-impact, high-visibility effect. Imagine firing a hockey puck so fast it will penetrate 1 inch of tempered steel. That essentially is an HVG. It's like a machine gun, only the bullets are accelerated not by a chemical explosion, but by electromagnetic acceleration. The acceleration is 100,000 Gs. That's right, 100,000 times the force of gravity. To put it in perspective, a fighter pilot maxes out at about 10 Gs. HVGs can be space-based or ground-based. The launch velocity of a space-based gun would be about 10 kilometers per second. A high-powered hunting rifle carries a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second. HVG muzzle velocity is over 32,000 feet per second. You can see what it does to steel plating. Imagine what it can do to the thin skin of a ballistic missile. Neutral particle beam is one of the more exotic SDI systems. It works primarily by totally scrambling the control and computer systems of the incoming missile or RV. A neutral particle beam is a stream of highly accelerated negative ions. The technology has been around for years. In fact, one promising approach is the Soviet-developed RFQ, or radio frequency quadrupole system. Its chief advantage is its lightweight. NPB can also be used to mark or paint warheads and allow other kill weapons to distinguish warheads from decoys. A major challenge is to reduce the size of NPB accelerators so they can be boosted into space and to generate the kind of power needed. Accelerator size has been reduced substantially, as you can see, but it is mandatory that power in the range of 50 MeVs be maintained. That's 50 million electron volts. The Bear test, launched on July 13, 1989, was the first successful operation of a directed energy weapon in space. It proved that directed energy can be reliably operated in space. The future of space-based SDI lasers is found in the Alpha laser, which became operational in April 1989. This is a chemical-based laser. It has the advantage of low power consumption and smaller size. Space-based lasers have the further advantage of no atmospheric distortion and can go straight line to the target. With lethality demonstrated, the next major step is beam control and pointing. As the old joke goes, it's all done with mirrors. The LAMP, or Large Advanced Mirror Program, is designed to achieve this. When operational, LAMP will be several times larger than the Hubble Space Telescope. Even if full lethality is not achieved with a chemical space-based laser, its ability to destroy decoys, especially balloon decoys, thermally tag warheads, and create a velocity change signature on the warhead will make kills by other layers of SDI easier and faster. Ever since an atmospherically corrected laser tracked a booster rocket in 1985, the ability to propagate a laser beam from the ground into space seemed feasible. Laser light is absolutely parallel. A distortion in the atmosphere, like the wavy shimmering you see looking out over the road on a hot summer day, reduces the laser's effectiveness. SDI computers are now calculating the distortion in real time and adjusting the mirror to compensate for such distortion, creating a true and effective laser beam as it emerges from the atmosphere. In February 1990, a Delta II launched both LACE and RME into space. LACE is a 2.5-year low-power atmospheric compensation experiment to further refine beam distortion issues. RME will demonstrate the ability to reflect a laser beam from a space mirror and point to a target. Such a target may be a series of fighting mirrors, which in turn will divide the beam and aim multiple beams at multiple targets. GBL is not limited in power due to boosting weight limits. One of the more promising paths for ground-based lasers is FEL, or free electron laser. Electrons are jarred loose from their atoms and fed as bundles or electron bullets into a laser beam. Such an approach increases the lethality of the beam while offering the possibility of lower power consumption. This translates into more lasers at the same cost. In this video, we attempted to give you an overview of SDI, only outline its many successes, and look at some of SDI's more interesting systems. Over the next 12 months, a significant number of SDI systems will be tested in a series of VAL-DEM, or validation and demonstration tests. These tests will focus more on full systems and system integration and less on components than in the past several years.
I believe that's 0428.
Of course, our government says it's all balderdash, but it's enough to send the spirits of believers skyrocketing. We examined the videotape in our offices with hotshot UFO researcher Don Ecker. Ecker is a police detective in the Pacific Northwest who's now on the staff of UFO magazine.
Okay, here it is. You see it? Now watch it. Now as it gets up here, we'll make a right angle turn, shoot off into space, and something flashes past them. There. And whoosh.
They're shooting stars.
Shooting stars, my... That's no shooting star. That whatever that thing is took an evasive maneuver.
There have been videotapes before, of course, but this simple footage is said to be much more convincing. Now, watch closely. There, beneath the shuttle, is planet Earth. Thunderstorms light up the night sky. But then something very curious happens. Watch this white dot. At first, it appears to be just a piece of space junk lost in orbit. Then, it makes a right turn, accelerates, and appears to fly away.
Run it back a little more. Okay, that's good. All right, now this thing is traveling this way. It suddenly makes a right angle turn and shoots into space. Right here. Now watch it.
Now we're blowing this up to see
Right,
it better.
watch it. There it goes, and here comes the shot.
They say this shot is the most remarkable thing of all on the tape. It could appear that the object turned sharply to avoid this white streak, which flies by exactly where the object had been a moment before.
Something appears to be shooting at it. Because it anticipates something where it flashes into space. There we go. And a split second later, something flashes past it.
NASA's official version is that the object is a piece of ice from wastewater the shuttle dumped on a previous orbit. They have no comment on what appears to be a shot streaking past it, or on how it could turn and fly off in another direction.
Why is that not a piece of ice?
Well, did you ever see a piece of ice do this?
Do what?
Watch it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It makes a right angle turn, it increases speed dramatically and shoots into space. There it goes.
The tape itself was shot by one of the astronauts aboard the Discovery and beamed down to Earth live.
There's no way that the shuttle can make a right angle turn, shoot off into space. This apparently is displaying a propulsion system that is not manufactured in Detroit.
Look again, this could be a UFO smoking gun or just pieces of ice and space garbage in...
Although event number 1 is not as significant as events 2, 3, and 4, it still remains unexplained. Events 2, 3, and 4, however, are substantially more significant, contain numerous activities which seem unusual at best for explainable objects, and are discussed first. Clarification of event number 2 follows. The scene begins with a night view of a lightning storm and some of the stars in the constellation Orion, which are commented by the ground controller and acknowledged by the astronaut. The top of the atmosphere is observed as a thin white line in this area. Approximately a quarter to a half inch below that is observed the limb or the horizon of the Earth. Stars can be seen setting through the atmosphere at the limb of the Earth in this area. Fixed points of light on the ground appear to move upward as STS-48 moves in orbit. After the storm passes, the STS-48 passes over an area near New Zealand, and the ground control points move into the distance. At this point, the action begins. There are many objects that begin to move at various speeds and angle of direction, some of which are noted as objects with assigned numbers and referenced in this drawing. Many other objects pass by but are not shown on this drawing to avoid cluttering the drawing. No voices are exchanged between astronaut or ground controller during this activity. The magnitude of brightness of the object is noted as large circles, and the fainter the objects are noted as smaller circles. The distance traveled by each object is given as the line length. To begin with, object number 1 begins to move from right to left as observed in this area on the screen. When it reaches the extent of the line, the light appears to go out, and then object number 2, observed in this area of the screen, appears to rise over the limb of the Earth, or the horizon, move in a direction toward this point, and just at this point, there's a large flash of light in this area. The object number 2 then makes a course correction and turns at 145 degrees, accelerates, and moves on out into space. By calculation of the speed where it's moving here to the speed that it's moving here, it appears to have accelerated about 3 times its original speed when it was moving in this direction. The third event is a large streak of light which moves upward towards where object number 2 was located. Object number 4, which is another large streak of light, moves in this direction, also upward. Simultaneously, while this object number 2 is making its turn, objects number 5, number 7, number 8, and number 6 also execute turns as indicated on the drawing. The objects shown here during this entire time appear to move downward as if to be in a lower orbit which moves slightly faster than STS-48. After the activity subsides somewhat, verbal communication begins between ground controller and astronaut, and the camera aboard the spacecraft begins to move away from this scene, moving downward, and picks up other objects which appear to move at various directions across the screen. One of these objects appears right in the center of the screen and has a definite shape to it, a triangular shape. The object is further enhanced and enlarged so as to get a better look at the object. Now let's take a look at the scene.
Houston Discovery, the test is complete and results were normal.
We copy, Ken, and we concur. And just a few comm notes for you. We're going to command the PST off for you as part of the UR's closeout procedure. You might get some messages that you can ignore. Also, we're reconfiguring the telemetry formats to 103 and 161 from the ground.
Okay, we copy, and on my panel I'm showing tank 1 manifold valves closed for O2 and H2, and the react valve is, talkback is open.
We copy, and we like your config.
Okay, thanks.
And Discover Houston, while you're looking at Orion, we're getting a pretty tremendous light show. We're looking at the lightning on the Earth.
I was looking at that myself, and looks like we're coming up on sunrise.
Discovery Houston, and just a heads up, we're heading off the nose, may get some radicom.
Okay, Jan, thanks.
Discovery Houston for JO.
Yeah, Jan, go ahead.
Morning, JO. We predict the maneuver to the supply water dump attitude will take about 15 minutes, and in order to start the dump on time, we'd like for you to do that maneuver now. We need it to prevent contamination.
Okay, I understand you want us to start the supply water dump now, or at least initiate the maneuver now.
We'd like for you to initiate the maneuver, and then when you get there, initiate the water dump.
I understand.
communication of event number 3 follows. To begin with, there's some verbal communication between the astronaut and ground control, after which all verbal communication stops and the action takes place. There is no verbal communication while this activity is in progress. To begin with, the first object that appears is an elongated object in this area of the screen, which moves in this direction until it exits the screen. The next object, number 2, appears in this section of the screen. It appears to move in this direction and wobble or rotate as it's moving in this direction. Just about at this point, the camera from STS-48 zooms in on the object, loses the object after a while because it's continuing to move off the screen. The camera then zooms out to resume picking up the image of the object. The object appears again, continuing to move in this direction. And just about at this point, there's a bright object which streaks across the screen, moving in this direction. The two objects almost intersect at this point. Several seconds pass by, and object number 4 appears to come from this area of the screen, moving downward as a streak of light. The next two objects, number 5 and 6, appear along this path, 5 being first, moving very rapidly across the screen, followed immediately by object number 6, which moves along the same path. Just about the end of the excursion of object number 6, we see a very peculiar object up in this area of the screen, which moves from this point to this point. And the object is only visible for a second or less, and immediately the camera is switched off to another area of the spacecraft, to another camera in the spacecraft, and we lose sight of this entire scene. This object up in the corner has an unusual shape and appears to have an elongated section in the middle that is darker than the two circular sections at the top and at the bottom. This object will be enlarged at the end of the scene and enhanced for easier viewing.
This is Mission Control. The troubleshooting downlink that Mark Brown is sending down 3 images for is because we seem to have had more trouble getting our electronic still camera images downlinked on the western satellite than on the eastern satellite, and the ground control officer would like more information, and this test will allow them to get some more data about why it doesn't seem to work as well on the western satellite.
Marcia, just be advised, we've added on some mode pictures to disc 6 that we'd like to get down sometime tonight.
Mark, how many additional images do you need to send?
I think the disc total has somewhere about 35 on it.
Okay.